You wake up and the things that used to matter, impressing people, making money, falling in love, they all feel distant, like toys you've outgrown. You look at your old goals and you feel nothing. You scroll, you buy, you chase, you achieve, and you still feel bored. You don't feel sad, you feel finished. You worry that you're losing your mind. You were trained to call this depression or a midlife crisis. You were trained to panic the moment you stop craving what everyone else craves. You were trained to think something is wrong with you, precisely because you've become difficult to control, because the system can't sell to a person who wants nothing. But Jung knew better. You are not broken. You are graduating. You are entering the Sophia Stage, the final level of consciousness where the ego stops begging. The soul starts ruling, and your silence becomes a weapon. And if you're here, it's because part of you already knows the forbidden question you've been afraid to ask. Is your boredom with life actually a sign that you have conquered it? You were taught that isolation is a failure. You were taught that constant excitement is health. You were taught that being relatable is safety. You were taught that if you don't feel pleasure the way everyone else does, you must be defective. You weren't taught this because it's true. You were taught this because it makes you manageable. Because a person with emotional independence is no longer bribed by applause. Because a person who has found the observer self cannot be baited by petty power games. Because a person transcending ego stops performing for a crowd that never loved them, only used them, and that's why you feel the pressure right now. That's why you feel the loneliness right now. That's why you feel the emptiness right now, not because you're dying, because a false self is dying. In this video, you're going to get the 5 signs you've reached Sophia Wisdom, the final stage awakening that looks like numbness to the untrained mind, but feels like sovereignty to the one who understands it. You will stop calling your detachment anhedonia and start seeing it as spiritual maturity. You will stop fearing your quiet and start using it as strategic silence, manipulation defense, power dynamics mastery, and social dominance without losing your soul. And by the end, you will be able to answer the forbidden question clearly. Your boredom isn't the end of you. It's evidence you've outgrown the cage. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a final level in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. You don't want more. You want what's real. You notice it first in your appetite. You notice it in how the old pleasures don't land. You notice it in how compliments feel cheap. You notice it in how attention feels noisy. You notice it in how the chase feels childish. You used to want the dopamine. You used to want to win the room. You used to want to be chosen. You used to want to be admired. You used to want to be understood. Now you want truth. Now you want clarity. Now you want inner alignment. Now you want clean motives, yours and theirs. Now you want a life that doesn't require performance. This is the first sign of the Sophia stage. You stop chasing stimulation and start craving meaning. And meaning is not a mood. Meaning is structure. Meaning is a spine. The world chases happiness. The Sophia chases truth. They are not the same. You feel bored because your nervous system is no longer impressed by cheap currency. You feel numb because you're no longer hypnotized by the same tricks. You feel detached because your psyche has stopped donating energy to illusions. You don't hate life. You hate the lie you were living inside it. And here's the part nobody tells you. What people call anhedonia is often a withdrawal symptom. You are withdrawing from the drug of external validation. You are withdrawing from the addiction to being needed. You are withdrawing from the endless, humiliating loop of prove yourself to people who never intended to respect you anyway. You were the used nice person because you were trained to negotiate with your worth. You were trained to over-explain. You were trained to give one more chance. You were trained to be reasonable while others were strategic. You were trained to keep the peace while others took territory. And now your body is refusing. You can't unsee the power dynamics. You can't unsee the manipulation patterns. You can't unsee the emotional blackmail disguised as love. You can't unsee how often be kind actually meant be available. You are not losing pleasure. You are losing tolerance for psychological debt. You aren't numb. You are just finished with the drama. You will start noticing that your mind wants fewer things, but stronger things. You will start noticing that you can sit in silence without reaching for noise. You will start noticing that you prefer one honest conversation over 100 social performances. This is spiritual maturity, not malfunction. And before you start wondering if you're becoming cold, answer this. When you stopped reacting, did you become cruel? Or did you become precise? When you stopped chasing, did you become empty? Or did you become free? When you stopped caring about being liked, did you lose your humanity? Or did you finally regain your self-respect? Here is the tactical advantage your emotionally reactive competitors will never have. You don't need the bait. And if you don't need the bait, you don't enter the trap. Most men get stuck at the Helen stage. I'll explain why in section 2, because that stage makes you addicted to being seen, and addiction is always a leash. You start enjoying what used to scare you, distance. You pull back and you feel guilty at first. You stop replying instantly and you feel uneasy. You cancel plans and you feel like you're doing something wrong. You choose solitude and you feel the old programming scream, you'll end up alone. Good, let it scream. That voice is not your wisdom. That voice is your conditioning. If you feel lonely, it is because there are very few people at the peak of the mountain. This is the second sign. Your social appetite shrinks because your standards rise. You stop wanting more people. You start wanting more depth. You stop wanting to be included. You start wanting to be intact. You notice how many relationships were built on roles, not reality. You were the listener. You were the helper. You were the safe option. You were the emotional landfill. You were the stable one people leaned on while they chased chaos. And then you got quiet. And suddenly, they called you distant. They called you selfish. They called you different. They called you cold. They don't miss you. They miss access. You need to understand this. Existential loneliness is not always a symptom. Sometimes it's a filter. Sometimes it's a rite of passage. Sometimes it's the cost of emotional independence. Stop trying to fit in. You are an oak tree trying to fit in a flower pot. You are not here to be a decorative plant in someone else's fragile little world. You are here to become a system. You are here to become a law. You are here to become someone who can't be emotionally extorted. You will recognize your parents in the Eve stage immediately, because Eve is survival-based love, security, comfort, dependence. And when you evolve past that, the people still living there will interpret your growth as betrayal. This is where Hermeticism begins to make sense to you, not as cosplay, as psychology. You start protecting your inner world because you finally realize how expensive it is. You start saying no without speeches. You start leaving rooms without announcements. You start disappearing from conversations that exist only to drain you. And here's a brutal truth. Your isolation will offend people who benefited from your availability. You will feel it in the way they probe you. You will feel it in the way they test you. You will feel it in the way they ask, "Are you okay?" when what they mean is, "Are you still controllable?" You don't answer that question with explanations. You answer it with consistency. This is weaponized detachment. You withdraw your presence the moment you detect disrespect, manipulation, or emotional extraction. You don't argue, you don't plead, you don't chase closure, you don't try to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You observe, you measure, you move, and you keep watching, because in the next sign, you'll realize why your silence is not passivity, it's dominance. You used to narrate your soul to people who weren't even listening. You used to explain yourself like your boundaries needed a permission slip. You used to defend your intentions because you thought misunderstanding was an accident. Now you understand. Misunderstanding is often a strategy. This is the third sign of Sophia Wisdom. You stop speaking to be believed and start speaking only when it changes reality. You stop volunteering your inner world to anyone who asks. You stop handing your emotional data to people who will weaponize it later. You learn the difference between intimacy and exposure. You learn the difference between honesty and leakage. You learn the difference between openness and being readable. And when you do, your entire social life changes. You start using silence as a scalpel. You pause before you respond. You let people finish their manipulation scripts. You let them try the guilt. You let them try the urgency. You let them try the pity. You let them try the anger, and you don't flinch. Wisdom is the death of illusion, and death is always painful at first. You begin to see how much of the world is built on emotional reactivity. You see people baiting each other for status. You see couples escalating for control. You see co-workers provoking to extract a mistake. You see friends joking to test dominance. You don't take the bait. You don't defend your ego. You don't swing back. You become the observer self in real time. This is what the observer self actually means in power dynamics. You are present, but you are not possessed. You are engaged, but you are not hooked. You are listening, but you are not volunteering your center. You might think you are a sociopath. You are not. Here's the difference. A sociopath lacks conscience. You, in the Sophia stage, have conscience, but you no longer have compulsive compliance. You have boundaries. You have standards. You have self-respect. You have emotional independence. And this is where your old identity panics. Because your old identity believed love meant explaining. Your old identity believed goodness meant forgiving. Your old identity believed maturity meant tolerating. Your old identity believed strength meant staying calm while being exploited. No. Strength is choosing what deserves your energy. Strength is withdrawing attention as soon as you detect manipulation. Strength is refusing to be emotionally recruited into someone else's chaos. You aren't numb. You are just finished with the drama. And when you stop reacting, something terrifying happens for the people who used to control you. They can't read you. They can't predict you. They can't steer you. They can't farm your emotions for leverage. Your psyche becomes an opaque fortress. Wait until you see how this changes your romantic relationships, because the Sophia stage doesn't make you unloving. It makes you unbuyable. This is where Carl Jung gets dangerously accurate. You don't just evolve socially, you evolve internally. The fourth sign of the Sophia stage is the integration of the feminine principle, what Jung called the Anima, into a mature form that no longer begs to be chosen. You stop needing a person to complete your life. You stop needing romance to prove your worth. You stop needing sexual attention to feel alive. You stop needing someone's chaos to feel needed. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. And if you've never heard the Jungian stages, listen closely, because this will map your entire emotional history. Eve is survival love, security, comfort, dependence. Helen is image love, beauty, validation, social status. Mary is moral love. I'm good, so I must be rewarded. Sophia is wisdom love, truth, wholeness, consciousness. Most people never leave Helen. Most people build their identity on being desired. Most people call it confidence, but it's just dependence with makeup. Most men get stuck at the Helen stage. I'll explain why in section 2, because if your worth depends on being wanted, you are always one rejection away from collapse. And Mary is where the betrayed intellectual often gets trapped. You were polite. You were loyal. You were principled. You were the good one. You were the one who didn't manipulate. And you waited for life to reward you for it. The Mary stage kept you a prisoner of nice. Sophia makes you free. This is where you stop being a used nice person and become a respected strategist. You stop giving girlfriend-level access to someone who offers stranger-level effort. You stop giving boyfriend-level protection to someone who offers convenience-level loyalty. You stop negotiating your boundaries to avoid abandonment. You choose solitude over a low-grade bond. You choose peace over chemistry. You choose depth over attention. And here's the part that will sting. Your old romantic pattern wasn't love. Your old romantic pattern was an attempt to heal a childhood wound with adult bodies. This is what Carl Jung Anima work actually looks like in real life. You stop outsourcing your inner feminine, your sensitivity, your intuition, your need for warmth to a partner. You develop it inside. You become internally resourced. You become emotionally self-sufficient. Carl Jung Anima is not a theory to you anymore. It is a lived architecture. Carl Jung Anima becomes your manipulation defense because you stop confusing craving with destiny. Carl Jung Anima becomes your strategic thinking because you can sense the difference between genuine interest and emotional fishing. You start seeing seduction as a power exchange. You start seeing flattery as a test. You start seeing hot and cold behavior as control. You start seeing chaos as a strategy to keep you chasing, and you step back. The transition to Sophia requires a specific sacrifice explained in Section 4, and this is it. You sacrifice the fantasy that someone else will save you from yourself. You don't become bitter, you become clean. You don't become arrogant, you become quiet. You don't become detached because you can't feel. You become detached because you finally can feel, and you refuse to hand your feelings to the unworthy. You are not heartless, you are sovereign. Now listen, because the fifth sign is where the final level becomes undeniable, and it's where your boredom gets reinterpreted as victory. The fifth sign of Sophia Wisdom is simple, and it will terrify your old self. You stop asking life for permission. You stop asking, what should I do? You start asking, what is the most truthful action? You stop asking, what will they think? You start asking, what does my future respect? You stop asking, how do I fit in? You start asking, what do I build? This is the shift from living inside a social script to living inside an inner law. This is transcending ego. Because the ego is the part of you that needs to win. The ego is the part of you that needs to be seen. The ego is the part of you that needs to be right. The ego is the part of you that needs to matter in the eyes of people who don't even matter to you. When you are transcending ego, you don't need to prove. You need to become. You stop fighting small wars. You stop correcting every misunderstanding. You stop trying to fix people who profit from being broken. You stop chasing closure from those who enjoy leaving you open-ended. You become strategically silent, not because you are weak, because you are efficient. Stop for a moment and calculate the energy you waste on being misread by people committed to your smallest version. Stop for a moment and calculate the energy you waste on defending yourself to someone who already decided your role. Stop for a moment and calculate how much of your life was spent performing emotional labor for people who called it friendship. Now withdraw that validation, withdraw that explanation, withdraw that overfunctioning. Withdraw that reflex to be nice. Implement this silence. Observe without engagement. Choose without apology. The great detachment is scary, but Section 5 shows why it is vital. Because detachment is how you reclaim your attention, and your attention is your only real currency. And here's the answer to the forbidden question, the one you came here to finally hear, spoken without fear. Is your boredom with life actually a sign that you have conquered it? Yes, when your boredom is not emptiness, but immunity. You are bored with the old life because you learned the trick. You are bored with the old game because you see the strings. You are bored with the old rewards because you now understand the cost. You see the transaction behind the smile. You see the insecurity behind the flex. You see the hunger behind the attention-seeking. You see the fear behind the control, and you don't hate them for it. You just don't join it. This is final stage awakening. Final stage awakening looks like less desire. Final stage awakening feels like more freedom. Final stage awakening creates emotional independence. Final stage awakening stabilizes the observer self. And when you reach this stage, you stop needing life to entertain you, because you start using life to express you. The final secret of the Sophia stage is what happens after you reach it. And it's not fireworks. It's peace with teeth. You become a person who doesn't beg. You become a person who doesn't chase. You become a person who doesn't react. You become a person who doesn't negotiate their worth. You become a person who can love without losing power. And that is why people start treating you differently. Not because you got louder, because you got heavier, because your presence has gravity now, because your boundaries have consequences now, because your silence signals options now. You were taught that kindness is the highest virtue, but you were never taught that kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. You were never taught that compassion without discernment is a doormat. You were never taught that being understanding can be a form of cowardice. Sophia Wisdom doesn't kill your heart. Sophia Wisdom upgrades your standards. Sophia Wisdom doesn't make you isolated by accident. Sophia Wisdom makes you selective on purpose. And if your loneliness is peaking right now, remember this. If you feel lonely, it is because there are very few people at the peak of the mountain. Now, let's bring it all together, because the conclusion is where you stop fearing the emptiness and start using it as your clean slate. You came here confused. You stay because you recognized yourself. You breathe because you feel relief. You straighten your spine because you feel validated. You lift your chin because you feel superior, not to others, but to your old programming. You accept the cost. And then you finally get peace. The emptiness you feel is not a void. It is a clean slate. Fill it with your own law. You don't need to be entertained. You need to be aligned. You don't need more friends. You need more truth. You don't need more pleasure. You need more purpose. You are not behind. You are ahead. You are early. You are rare. So here's your final challenge. Simple, brutal, liberating. Stop chasing the world. Let it spin while you watch. You don't have to announce your evolution. You don't have to defend your detachment. You don't have to explain your silence. You just have to live like someone who cannot be bought. Drop "I am ready" in the comments if you're done begging life to feel meaningful, and you're ready to become meaningful on purpose, and subscribe, not for entertainment, not for motivation, for the graduated souls. For the ones who can handle dark psychology without becoming it. For the ones who want power without noise. For the ones building emotional independence, mastering the observer self, and transcending ego into something clean. Now that you understand your evolution, learn the relationship truths that the Sophia mind sees clearly. Watch this. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.